We have any new... Welcome to you all. We do note there are several apologies, even as late as this morning. There are some people who you might have expected to see at this meeting who are unable to attend. And unfortunately, we are unable to welcome visitors into this space. We're really at the capacity, at our COVID capacity of this room. And so, unfortunately, it's for members only present, although some of the sessions are live streamed, including now. We also, as well as noting some first-time members at Synod, we welcome a transfer into the Synod of Reverend Marion Millen, retired, from Western Australia. I don't think Marion is part of this meeting, but we acknowledge a transfer into the Synod of South Australia. Today, and for the rest of the meeting, we will be using the consensus model of decision-making as we discern together God's will for this church at this time. And so therefore you will find in your black bag the coloured cards, and as a reminder, you may use those cards during the meeting. It's not just as we call for a so-called vote, but to arrive at a decision. It's to indicate at any time whether you are warm by showing an orange card or cool by showing a blue card to any discussion that is happening up the front. The yellow cards are there to remind, to be used if you wish to ask a question, as an indication that you have a question, and you may then move to the microphone, which is placed in the centre aisle. One of the changes is there to fit the chairs in. There is only one aisle, but there is more room around the chairs with them spaced further apart. So you'll see a microphone, two microphones there. One is set for taller people and one for shorter. Please do not touch the microphones. They will pick up, if you are standing on the square, they will you will be able to be heard, but please do not touch those microphones, or else we will have to clean them before someone else can speak. So it depends how much time you want the meeting to take. And if you do come to a microphone, please stand on the crosses appropriately spaced back along the centre aisle. I also remind people when they are holding up their cards, only hold up one at a time. It's very handy to keep them all in a pile in a deck, but only hold up one card at a time, because people on a different angle from you may see a different coloured card to the one you're expecting to show. Now, Proposal 1, which sets out many of the mechanics of this meeting, was passed in our first session on the 30th of January. However, there have been requests to associate additional people for parts of this meeting, particularly to speak at electives. They won't be part of decision-making, and so now I invite the Associate General Secretary to bring those names, as it will appear in your papers as Proposal 14. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Moderator. Members of Synod, yes, Proposal 14 appeared just this week, and we've had some additional names to the proposal that you have in your papers as well. And these are people who are joining us for proposals or reports. Some of them are joining us for electives, and so those are the names listed there on the screen. The additional names to what's in your papers are Neril McCallum, Christy Capper, Ian Dempster and Steph Van Rossen. Moderator, I present Proposal 14.
Thank you. Now, are there any questions, firstly, about Proposal 14? It's fairly straightforward. Good one to get started with. Okay, for decision, Please indicate your warmth or otherwise towards adopting Proposal 14. I believe we have consensus. Yes, we have consensus. Thank you. Now we come to a time of receiving information in preparation for the time that will be spent after morning tea in working groups discussing these two significant reports and the proposals coming out of them. After each presentation, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions for clarification to enable you to discuss these reports in your working groups after morning tea. So for each report, there will be 20 minutes of presentation and then a time for questions. So go to the centre of the microphone when you do have any questions for clarification. But firstly, I now invite those presenting Proposal 11 to go to the microphone.
Good morning, members of Synod. I want to add my welcome to you all. It's such a joy to be at a face-to-face gathering, and indeed to be at a face-to-face gathering of our Synod. Followers of Christ gathering to discuss and make discernments about matters of importance to the life and witness of the Church. To be here together in person, albeit a slightly smaller group, and indeed for me to be standing at a cleaned lectern. I hope that you've navigated the Code Safe plan that lots of people have been working really hard to ensure that we're familiar with. And I want to add my encouragement to you to maintain your physical distancing wherever possible, to use lots of soap and hot water, and indeed the sanitiser that we provide, and most importantly, to care for each other over these next 3 days. I want to also acknowledge the Kaurna people and that we gather on Kaurna land. From before recorded time, God breathed life into this land and into the Kaurna people, blessing this place through their care and concern. I join with you in paying my respects to their elders and their leaders, past and present. And we pray for their future communities. May we walk gently and respectfully together on this land. Leanne and I are here to present the Strategic Planning Working Group report and its associated proposals, and to introduce to you Shaping Our Future Strategic Priorities. You'll find it in your documents. It's S1.3 in your folder. Indeed, most of the working group are here today, and I want to encourage those people who are here to stand. We're doing the standing's about, just stretching the muscles, but those members of the working group who are here, because I want us to thank that team for the work that they have done in very different circumstances. You might. Thank you. Journeying alongside the activity of the working group CMLA was encouraging local artists to submit works to get towards a Synod art project. Neril is going to come and tell us briefly about the exhibition, some of which you can see hanging here in the auditorium. Thanks, Neril.
Thank you, General Secretary. So you might be asking why we have visual arts as part of the conversation around the strategic plan. Well, I don't know if you've ever stood in front of a painting and thought, I have no idea why that is art, or have instantaneously loved it. Hopefully that has started you wondering. Art asks us to pay attention, and art inspires curiosity. As we imagine what an artist was thinking and wanting to communicate as they created, our curiosity is provoked. Curious thinking is a gift of the Spirit, and it calls us into the divine. Art opens space for contemplation, looking and thinking, inner listening, deep searching and expressing. It's prayer. It creates space to take notice of each other, our own souls, and the voice of God. Research on what makes a good organisation says that if creativity, innovation and open conversations are elements of an organisation's culture, then having art around is impactful, as all those who engage with the organisation actually see those values physically portrayed. So art does speak to what the South Australian Synod is wanting to do with its strategic plan. It broadens and opens up the discussion beyond words and meetings. The graffiti artist Banksy says, bus stops are far more interesting and useful places to have art than museums. The Synod Art Project hasn't put art in bus stops. Well, not yet. But we have decided an interesting and useful place for art is the Synod office. Over 40 artists who are associated with the Uniting Church in South Australia were invited to create works that consider how we experience our communion, our togetherness with God, one another, and all of creation in the everyday. To think about the idea of the Trinity as a symbol of God's salvation and grace, redemptive for all, and how we hear the triune God's all-embracing invitation to communion with God, all people, and all of creation. 16 artists from throughout the state have produced over 40 works in a variety of media that have taken up this conversation. Some of them are exhibited here. All of them will be on display in the Synod office over the next 3 months. We are keen for you to engage with them, and we will be offering you opportunities to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Neril, and members of Synod, I encourage you at your break times to have a closer look at the works that are before you. They are just a taste of what will be on display in the Synod office. As the working group began its work, and by way of, as we start to unpack the strategic priorities for the coming years, there were a couple of conversations that the working group needed to have. They were not always comfortable with the idea of strategic plan. It bubbled in us. What did it mean? Who was it for? Having a strategic plan sounded a bit secular and not quite missional. It was a bit sort of businessy and rather than ministry. It felt a little self-centred, people-focused rather than God-focused. Given 2020 and 2021 are such different and unique spaces, we were looking for something that was interactive, a hands-on document. We were looking for something that helped us know how each one of us was the Synod. Not just those pirates in Perry Street. We were looking for something that reflected you and me, acknowledging and embracing all that was different about that. Following our conversations with the church, that we knew we were not looking for a neat and tidy 3-point plan. The Synod indeed needed to be looking for some priorities that would serve to connect us, support and resource us, and draw us into God's future, partnering together. So Leanne's going to share with us some of the context in which we bring to you the strategic priorities going forward. Thanks, Leanne.
As a working group, we were all set to begin after the standing committee meeting we had about 12 months ago, when the working group was appointed. But before we could meet together in the same room, we were told to stay home. So we did. And it was this time we discovered technology can actually be a wonderful thing. And so while we couldn't meet in the same room, we could still gather and talk about this process. But it soon became apparent that we were all living in a time, and we still are really, when trying to think about a plan for the future was too much, when in congregations, leaders of our churches, our groups, our organisations associated with the church, we were all struggling to think beyond the next day, or the next Sunday, or the next week. A pandemic coming on top of devastating bushfires, on top of our major work in restructuring to 3 presbyteries, meant we in the working group, but I suspect we all, were struggling to know what normal might look like. We needed to pause, and so we did. When we finally got together, we started talking about things that were going to happen. We started talking about what Synod is, and as Andrew reminded us in his presentation at the first session of our meeting a couple of weeks ago, Synod is not just one thing. It is a council of the church, as we are meeting as regularly as we can, and the standing committee between these times. Pretty sure we've all referred to that building on the corner of Perry and whatever street it's on, the Frome, thank you, I know I turned down it, 212 Perry Street. We call that the Synod. And of course we know that Synod is a geographic area that we are all part of, that all of our churches, our groups and our organisations are part of. How were we going to reconcile these different aspects and these different areas into a single plan? Whatever was going to happen, we knew as a working group that this was not going to happen just in our small group. We needed to talk. We needed to consult, and we did. We talked a lot, to a lot of different people. We talked with UAICC and organisations associated with the Uniting Church. We talked with congregations and with ministry leaders and with church councils. We talked with presbyteries. We talked with staff, with other groups. And we asked a lot of questions. And I'm sure, and at least I hope, many of you took part in the survey we had last year. So we got a lot of answers to all of those questions. And as we went through all the responses, we found there were things in common that were common across the conversations. We found similarities in conversations, and yet we knew we couldn't possibly include everything. So we tried to collate the responses as best we could. We distilled them down. We prayed a lot. We listened a lot. All of this to help us as we sought, and to be honest, are still seeking to identify what possibilities God is calling us to in a world that is very different to what it looked like 12 months ago. It became very apparent that a single plan was never going to work, because we know the Synod is not a single entity. So what has emerged from all the conversations, the survey, the prayer we've had, the discernment, is a number of priorities that we believe will help grow the mission of the church. This is where we have sought to discover what God is up to in the world and how we might get involved in it. These priorities have been designed to fit in with goals that presbyteries and congregations and organisations and boards and groups may already have. And as we consider all these priorities and our own contexts, we are contributing to the work and the mission of the Synod, whatever that might look like for you.
Thanks, Leanne. It's now my task to introduce you to the wheel. Members of Synod, you'll find in your Synod bag, although I have heard it referred to as your Synod suitcase, there are so many things in it, so many goodies. But in your bag, do you want to come and stand around this side? Yes, they don't see. It's more important they see that than me. That's all right. In your bag, you'll find shaping our your shaping our future wheel. As our report explains, this is not a document for the shelf. If you feel compelled to put it on the wall, it needs to be at a height where people can touch it and move the different parts. It's intentionally designed to be in your hand. It's an invitation to play. It's an invitation to interact and work with others, to understand what it means to be the Synod and to discern what God might be calling us to. For those of you who are feeling a little bit out of your comfort zone at the moment, imagining that strategic priorities and thinking is serious God business, and playing is probably not something that you had in mind in that space, I invite you to hang in there and see what might happen. The wheel begins in the radical centre with the Synod mission statement, and I hope that you'll recognise it. There are very few changes. But the Uniting Church in South Australia is an innovative, growing church, proclaiming Jesus Christ, empowered by the Spirit to transform God's world. It is the core of our being. It is who we are and why we exist. The mission statement is surrounded by a set of guiding principles. You may see them as a series of values, but regardless of which priority we are working on, these guiding principles shape our response and our activity. They apply to everything we do. You can see that it's in that beautiful goldy colour that so reflects the South Australian landscape, particularly at this time of year. That's the first wheel, and I'm sure that you've already discovered that it moves. The second wheel contains the primary roles and responsibilities of the Synod, a Synod of which we are all a part. Moving into a slightly more orange sunrise colour to promote and encourage the mission of our church, assisting congregations, presbyteries and other ministries to form authentic, empowered Christians to be the transforming presence of God in the world. The second responsibility is green, to ensure the provision of theological education, helping in the formation of people who are faithfully responding to God. The third, in blue, is providing effective supervision of property and financial resources to enhance all our assets. These three responsibilities are intentionally in a circle. They are not an ordered list. They work interactively and together, and indeed, again, they move. We then come to the outside circle, the strategic priorities that will support our future. The 11 priorities are identified through our conversations with congregations, presbyteries, committees, boards, ministers, pastors, chaplains, lay leaders, people from across the Synod. I want to draw your attention again to the reality that there are no fixed lines on this outer circle. The colours shade into each other. No priority is stuck in a single role and fixed or a fixed set of principles. They move because they're interrelated. No priority is the exclusive work of one council or committee. No particular congregation or ministry centre. No particular individual or team. They encourage us to tread lightly and to make connections. They seek to shape our activity, and they are deeply connected to our response to God's invitation on our lives through Christ. So I hope that you think it's beautiful. I hope that some of you might even think that it looks like fun. The big question, of course, is how does the thing work? As we respond to COVID, as we think about the property report, what difference will it make? How will it shape our relationship with chaplains or agencies or organisations? How will it help us embrace difference, respond to the complex needs of our world? How will it help us grow disciples? In your Synod bag, you'll also find an action plan. Yes, thank you, Leanne. It flips, that's right. It's on the back and the front. The action plan is a bit like a roadmap. It helps us to navigate the wheel, and it helps us to commit to working collaboratively together to embrace the priorities we've identified that will help us shape our future. The easiest way to introduce this document, of course, is to do it. In our report, there are lots of examples. Please hear that they are not prescriptive examples. we hope that you might find something there that will help you, your congregation, your committee, your board, your presbytery to navigate and identify your priorities and the Synod's priorities as we move forward. So, bravely, courageously, perhaps...
You need 4 hands.
You need 4 hands,
That's right.
okay. Leanne and I are going to try and do it with you. Jill has also graciously agreed to help us, and we're going to see how we go, because Leanne and I actually haven't planned this very well, okay?
Not this bit. Yeah.
Not this bit, yes. So, let's see how we go. If I hold this...
Hold that one.
All right.
I'll hold this one.
Okay. So, interacting with the wheel and seeking to develop our action plan. Leanne, who are you?
Let's be a congregation today.
You want to be a congregation?
Let's be a congregation.
Okay, you're
Yeah.
a congregation. So there's
Any
a
resemblance to existing congregations is purely coincidental.
We hear you. So there's a little box in the top right-hand corner to identify who you are and who is working on these priorities. So, Leanne, what do you think might be a priority that your congregation and the Synod would jointly have?
I think for this one we'll go with identifying and developing emerging leaders.
So right down here on your wheel, in that beautiful shaded space between green and blue, identifying emerging leaders. The Synod also shares that priority. I wonder if that's about property, or is it about forming and empowering people for mission, or is it about education? What do you think it's about?
I think we'll go with the mission of the church for this one. Oh,
Mission of the church?
Mission of the church, yes.
Okay,
Empowering
so
mission.
let's turn our wheel. So we're working to identify and develop emerging leaders. We're going to look through the mission of the church, authentic and empowered Christians. So that means on our action plan that we're not going to write on the blue row, because that's about resources and property. We're indeed going to use our the orange row that is the responsibility of the Synod to have oversight of the mission of the church. So the next question is, what might your guiding principles be?
Oh, the one that's there already.
The one, oh,
Innovative and creative, and courageous and
oh,
creative.
but I wanted to move the wheel.
Ooh, there we go. We'll move it right round.
All right, sorry. Okay, tell us.
So, innovative,
Innovative?
that's the one, and courageous.
Fantastic. So we're going to be innovative and courageous as we work with the Synod to empower Christians, and as we work on this priority to identify and develop emerging leaders. So you might, that's one pathway. You might also want to identify emerging leaders through the Synod responsibility of property, because your principle of caring for creation becomes your guiding principle, because you want to move to have solar panels on your roof. You might think about emerging leaders through a Synod responsibility of education, because your principle is discipling and growing and renewal, and you want to form people to rejuvenate congregations. So you can see that there are lots of possibilities and ways that you can work with the Synod through these priorities. Back to the congregation, Leanne. With the Synod priorities to identify emerging leaders, to promote mission, what was the next bit? Recognising that we need to be courageous and innovative. So, What difference will it make for your congregation if you work with the Synod to do this?
We will have courageous and innovative leaders.
Okay.
I would hope.
So that belongs into it. Jill, are you on to it? No, that doesn't look like it. Anyway, that's right, we'll keep going. The moderator will be telling me I'm going to run out of time. Okay, so the next bit is, what initial steps might we take, or might you take?
I would be contacting, well, this is where it starts to overlap, because I'd be contacting the college,
Yes?
and Synod office to look for leadership, training, mentoring, coaching, those sort of things. A whole pile of this.
Great, fantastic. And the priority actions, which is the next column?
Well, it would be that contact to start with, but then it would be inviting people to get involved. Maybe nudging people if need be.
Yep, some communication stuff even.
Yep.
Yep, sharing the ideas. Okay, and then there's a column there, Leanne, that talks about who and when and how. How long will it take?
I imagine this would take a while. It's one of the harder things to answer, but I think it would take a while.
Okay.
'Cause training takes a little while.
We haven't got forever in the church, you know.
No, I know, but
Okay.
we can still
All right.
take a couple of months, I think.
All right, well, probably. Even a couple of years.
Yeah, maybe.
That's okay. That's fantastic. And then the final column is about evaluation, and it's about encouraging us to identify what will be different and ensure that that actually happens. This is about remembering that this is not something for your shelf to collect dust. This is actually active and moving. So at the end of it, what might happen?
Oh, we could have people who've not served perhaps on church council before putting their hand up to be part of church council. Perhaps some young people standing up and saying, we want to run Messy Church. Again, possibilities. So just they become how we measure it.
Thank you, that's fantastic. So you have an action plan that's ready to go. The moderator won't let me do the next bit, which would be to encourage us as a synod to do it again together. But you get the drift. In summary, it's about identifying who you are, identifying a priority and how you're going to work with the Synod in that priority, what area you, what might be different because of the priorities that you identify and the guiding principles you use to enable that to happen. You'll be able to identify some initial steps to take, and that often involves research and talking to people and working out who's going to be involved. Then it's about developing an action plan, working about who will do it, who will be involved, what might happen and when it might happen, and then an evaluation process, some steps that you will take to ensure that this doesn't remain on your shelf, but indeed enables the church to be vibrant and to be supportive of its future. We're going to move to the proposals soon, but I want to conclude with some final comments. There are people to help you. You don't have to do this by yourself. Members of the working group are happy to come with you and meet with you. I'm also available to come and work with committees and boards and congregations and presbyteries around this. I suspect this year my Synod tour will involve supporting people to identify 2, perhaps 3 priorities that you would pick up through the body you're involved in to work with the Synod. I want to also encourage you to identify a priority that is outside your comfort zone. Something that you know will grow your ministry beyond where it currently is. I want to encourage you to fill out the action plan and send it in to the engagement team, or indeed to the Secretariat, wherever your address book allows you to, and we'll collect them and they'll be put on the website, and they'll form part of the strategic priorities of the Synod going forward. And I want to strongly encourage you to share in and be part of the work of the Synod. We're going to share some of those stories each time we gather as encouragement for us to work collaboratively. Because when we work together, we produce, we produce this radical centre. These strategic priorities will only work if we are in conversation together. If we can imagine ourselves as an effective team. If we are committed to a common purpose. If we're committed to beginning something new. This is not the time to sit on the sidelines and watch as others pick up the mantle. It's not the time to waste our energy arguing over who's right and who's wrong, whose ideas are better, whose perspective has greatest clarity. If we're committed to being the transforming presence of God, if we're committed to growing the church, advocating for justice in the world, being thriving communities of faith, gathering to hear Jesus' message to us, and equipping ourselves to respond, then we are committed to being a team together. Shaping our future holds us together. God in Christ holds us together. Together we are the church. Collaboratively we are all the Synod, and there is a place and a response for each one of us. Moderator Leanne and I stand to present this report to the Synod, and on behalf of the working group, we encourage the Synod's consideration and indeed are happy to receive questions for clarification before we go to working groups a little later in the morning.
Thank you, General Secretary. Due to the time, we have only time for a couple of questions purely for clarification, because you will have opportunity to discuss it in your working groups, and I'm sure you can ask the General Secretary to join your working group, or a member of the Strategic Planning Working Group to come to your working group if you have some other questions arise. But are there any quick questions at this point? No? Well, thank you very much for your presentation. I now call on those who are presenting the property review report to come to the microphone.
Moderator, can we also invite Peter Battersby and Matt Wilson to join us, as they'll may provide useful resource at the time when we're seeking questions for clarification.
Come on down. Moderator, it gives me great pleasure to bring before this Synod meeting this significant report. It's S19 in your papers, and the proposals that arise from it in Proposal 8. We don't have a wheel, but we do have a short video for you to watch to introduce this report.
The Uniting Church in South Australia is a geographic area of amazingly diverse but vibrant and interconnected communities of faith. The buildings in which we meet and in which we pray together are a vital part of the life and witness of our congregations. They are diverse, some modern, some traditional, and some are of historic and heritage value. The Synod has a responsibility to effectively supervise and manage the property and the resources within its bounds. We commend the following information to you for your prayerful and active discernment.
As people of faith, we are all called to act in God's interests. As bearers of the good news, spreading the transformational power of Jesus Christ, this call is to nurture disciples, advocate for and respond to the needs of the marginalised, to be the hands and feet of God in the world. As people involved in congregations and other ministries, we're always checking, are we listening to God? How best can we respond to God's call in our lives? And are we being effective at this time and in this place? For congregations that are thriving, it will be continuing to do what you're doing at the moment. For congregations that are struggling or declining, perhaps God is calling you to explore new and creative ways to be the church. Perhaps it's time to rethink how you can best be God's people of mission in the world.
Many of you will remember that in 1977 the Uniting Church came into being when 3 existing churches, Congregational, Methodist and Presbyterian, merged. At that time, the church established a property trust which owns all of the buildings. But each congregation, through its church council, has responsibility for the oversight and maintenance of the properties which that congregation uses. It is a model that provides confident oversight, but still allows congregations the autonomy to use their buildings as they need for mission.
So why do we need to do a property review?
Although the property trust owns all of the property, the Resources Board has a mandate to manage the properties and maximise them for mission, but also to manage the risk associated with that. It needs to keep an oversight of the big picture of all the properties which the church owns. The Resources Board began to receive reports of church buildings where things were going wrong. For example, walls were cracking, people were falling through floors, ceilings were collapsing, mainly due to the age of the buildings, but also because we are aware that maintenance wasn't being kept up. As you can imagine, this poses a serious risk, not just to the congregations themselves, but to the whole church. As part of our common life in the community of faith, we need to provide a safe place for everyone who attends our churches. And the Resources Board could see that this was not happening. Our buildings officer visited 255 congregations around South Australia and conducted an inspection of each building to see the state of the building, to check its electrics, to check its asbestos register, and to make sure that there was safe access for all people who use the property. This information has provided us with invaluable information about the state of all our properties, both about the health of our properties and the state of their decline. We used a traffic light system so that we could easily understand the state of each part of the property: church, manse, halls, car parks, etc. From this data, we compiled an overall rating for the property, whether it was green, yellow or red for the whole site.
What we've discovered is that across the Synod, 6% of sites are rated green, which means the property is functioning, maintained and has appropriate systems in place. However, 57% are rated yellow, meaning that the property in its present state doesn't meet all of the safety requirements and needs some work done. The bad news is that 37% of our sites are rated red, meaning they have no systems in place, or the systems are still being developed and there is a lot of work still to be done. Each congregation was given an estimate of the cost to do the work required. If you add these up, the total cost across the church to bring all properties up to the green rating is in the vicinity of $30 million, and we are legally obliged to do this.
Wow, that's significant.
Yes, it is. However, I think it's unreasonable that we allow congregations to sort this out by themselves. When it comes to solving this, we need to take a whole church approach. And when it comes to considering the money that's required, neither the Synod nor individual congregations in most cases have the money that is required. And while every congregation is different, the Resources Board could see that the only way to tackle this problem was to get the whole Synod to decide the way forward.
I'm sure that there are a number of things that we could do. We could raise the money to help pay for the repairs.
Or we could sell off some of our existing property to help pay for the repairs and upkeep of other properties.
But we all know that it's not quite that simple. We are called to be God's activity in the world, and we have to be sure that that's what we're doing. As the primary question becomes, are we using the building resources we have for the purpose of mission, and are we investing in them to ensure that they are safe and fit for purpose? The focus on our properties should always be through the lens of advancing God's mission.
The church has no choice but to act. The status quo is not working, and our bricks and mortar are failing us.
It's common in the church that whilst we're worrying about bricks and mortar, we can be distracted and not focus on the resources and bearing witness to Christ's saving love in the world. While the need to take action is urgent, it's not a problem for congregations to fix by themselves. The church as a whole has to decide what we're going to do about the challenges that are before us.
We cannot afford to delay any longer.
We have some recommendations, Rob, that we hope will guide the church in exploring how we might respond together.
That's good. So we thank all congregations and the Synod staff for the time and effort they've put into preparing this report.
Yes.
This property review report will be an integral part of our church going forward in deciding how it's going to face up to its life in mission.
So we commend the report to you and look forward to journeying together to resolve the building challenges we are facing. We give thanks for all our communities of faith as you continue to faithfully do God's work in the world. With blessing, may you continue to know God's love and grace through Jesus Christ.
And that video will be available for you to share with your leaders in your congregation, including the corny lines in it. Some of you with long memories will know that this sort of reform has been a passion of mine for almost 20 years now, beginning with the strategic mapping project in the early 2000s. That report was met with much resistance and indeed some anger from congregations who thought we were going to force them to close. And the history of the church's response since that time is detailed in the report, and I will not repeat what is written there, other than to say little has changed in the intervening years. But in thinking about what to say to introduce this report, I was reminded of words from the prophet Joel that Peter quoted on the day of Pentecost. Your young ones shall see visions, and your old ones, your venerable elders, shall dream dreams. So let me again share the dream that I hold for the church. And that dream is in essence for the church to refocus its attention on the mission of God. It's easy in responding to past reports, and it's easy in reading this report to think it's all about property. It's all about bricks and mortar. Now, bricks and mortar are important. Our properties mean much to us, but they only gain their true value when seen in the light of our participation in the mission of God. So although there is no specific proposal that speaks about refocusing our life on the mission of God, that is indeed the underlying current which must be addressed. Therefore, I would urge every congregation to begin their response to this report by asking themselves again how they are being called, how they are being used by God to participate in God's action in the world. The past year has indeed already begun to refocus some of our thinking, but let me suggest some basic missional questions that I think are pertinent for a congregation to ask themselves. And the basic question is, how are we engaging with the world around us? How are we intersecting with the lives of people in ways that bring comfort, healing, justice and hope into their lives? And how is our engagement with these people indeed bringing about life-giving, life-affirming change to their lives, to their being? When we know the answer to missional questions like these, and only when we know the answer to such questions, will we be in a place to know what property we need, what we need to keep, what we need to give up, what we need to change? I suspect that when we start to shape our property and mission in this way, we will have a renewed sense of pride in it, a new sense of purpose to make it and keep it fit for the mission of God. And I also suspect that when we begin to see the big picture of many of our congregations shaping their life afresh around mission, we will begin to see where it is more clearly, where we need our properties to be situated and what appropriate structures are required in those places. All of this tells us that change needs to happen. And we know that change is never easy. But this report tells us we have to change. And my dream is that we will begin to make changes, not just to preserve the status quo of our existing properties, but indeed to equip us as a church to better serve our part in God's action in the world. In concluding, I want to reiterate that this report belongs to us all. It needs to be addressed by us all, by the whole church. We need each congregation to take it seriously. We need each presbytery to take it seriously. We need the resources board, the property committee, the resources staff to take it seriously. It will require collaborative effort to bring about the change required. But together, I dream, I hope, I pray that we can indeed make our church and its buildings fit for mission.
Moderator, it's my task to second the proposals that are before the Synod that come out of our report, God's Church and its buildings, are they fit for mission? Each one of us has an understanding of the connection human beings have with place. We've learned from our Indigenous brothers and sisters how to be more intentional about connecting and articulating our feelings about place. Their understanding is based on the premise that we don't own the land or its special markings. We are caretakers. It is us. We are stewards, and we are one with it. We also have responsibility. Intergenerational farmers will tell us of their spiritual connections with place, its heartbeat, its personality, its giving and its taking. Those of you who have journeyed with ageing parents, loved ones who fought with you until their last breath about why they should have been allowed to stay in their own home, because they had a deep, iconic spiritual connection to that place, full of story and memory and knowing. Moving them because it was the right thing to do, or indeed it was the best thing for their health and care, and indeed sometimes because it was the only thing to do, was complex and difficult. Not everyone in the family agreed on the same course of action. Everyone, siblings, parents, uncles and aunties, it seems, had to deal with their own feelings and emotions and to develop a narrative that made sense to them. So we acknowledge that the future of our buildings is a very difficult conversation for the church to have. However, it is a conversation that we need to have, not in isolation, but together as a family. Part of this conversation is to understand what our relationships with these buildings are. It is useful, I believe, to document the stories of our relationship with place in a respectful way. It is essential to understand the ministry and mission of the church and what God might be saying to the church as we prepare for the future. While we have great clarity about what God is calling us to, maybe, knowing our contemporary context has changed radically in recent months. We are less clear, I think, about how we're going to respond and where the resources will come from to ensure that we are equipped for the task. As you prepared to come to Synod and thought about the issues associated with this report, I am sure you have formed many questions, and I hope that we will be able to address some of them today. However, this is not a challenge that the church needs to fix today. It is the next step in our conversation and our journey towards that decision. And indeed, there are many decisions to make. I was listening to a podcast recently that suggested that the average human being in Australia makes 35,000 decisions a day. Are you exhausted already? It's not even morning tea time. There are no assumptions in this report about how we're going to address the challenges we face. However, there is an imperative to act. What we need to be intentional about at this Synod gathering and over these next couple of days is that we do need to take action, and we are committed to doing it together. I often get asked the question, does the church council of our congregation have the last say? The shorter answer, you'll note the deep breath. The short answer to that question is yes. However, there's a huge, huge but. No congregation makes any decisions outside of or separated from its relationship with its presbytery, with its relationship with the Synod, and with its relationship with the Assembly. All our discernment around mission, around leadership, about property, education and pastoral care, all this discernment, all these decisions happen in community, collaboratively and together. In your bags, you have a short report. It's a summary of the larger report that Rob has introduced to you. And we hope that the short report might help you to connect with that larger report. And it might help you to begin to share this story with your congregations and presbyteries after Synod. For those of you who need the detail, in fact enjoy the detail, we refer you to the larger report, and indeed we encourage you to read it and to share it with others. For those of you who only need the summary version, please be encouraged to share it widely. Both are available on the website and are able to be printed if needed and used for your ongoing conversation. The report encourages us to think about the role of property in our mission, how we are reading the changing landscape or the context for mission, what parts does viability and sustainability and stewardship play in our mission, and is there a conversation about safety when we do indeed think about mission? Moderator, I believe that now is not the time to discuss the numbers or get stuck in the detail of the data. Now is a time to agree on the basic assumptions. Now is a time to thank the staff and all those people who've been involved in ensuring that this report, including the engagement team, is a first-rate and indeed helpful resource for the church. Now is the time to agree, to think about the key conclusions. I think it's section 8 in your report, and indeed to move to consider the proposals. There is a minor amendment to those proposals, and I'd like to foreshadow that in section 6 when it comes to that. It pertains to when we'll meet as the Synod, and as there is a proposal number 2 before the House around when that meeting will be, I wish, Moderator, to foreshadow that we might amend number 6 to read change to the next full meeting of the Synod. But no doubt we will address that amendment. It's already there. You see, the team. Peter every day. Peter Battersby and Matt Wilson are here to assist Rob and I to address any questions for clarification that you may have before we go to our working groups. We want to encourage you in your working groups to think about what in the report can you affirm? What further information do you need in order to come to a decision? And I join Rob in commending this report to the Synod.
Thank you, General Secretary. And Rob, as mover of the proposal, and thank you, Peter and Matt, for being available for those questions. And once again, it's questions of clarification. If there's something in the report that you didn't understand, would like the whole meeting to hear the response to, this is the opportunity. Otherwise, once again, you'll be moving into working groups to discuss this more deeply, and the questions that come out of that can either through the facilitation team or directly to the four people up here in particular who will be wandering around the meeting to ask as they go past. So if you have a question, please raise your yellow card and go to a microphone. Thank you, Paul. If others have questions, if they'd like to line up on those crosses behind where Paul is now, as you start, please indicate your name and your presbytery or other body that has appointed you.
Holger from Synod Mission Resourcing. Can I give a question regarding the proposals as well?
No, we're only looking at questions for clarification at the moment.
Yeah, the wording on the...
wording on the... If you've got a question about the
clarification, yeah.
Question on the wording of the proposal, yes.
Yeah, on page 46, number 5, there is wording to house vibrant missionary communities. Just wondering what these vibrant missionary communities already existing in our UCA essay, or just wondering what that means.
Thank you, Paul, for your question. I understand your question is seeking some clarification about who will define what is an active and vibrant missional congregation. And that's a really good question and a really important question, and it's not something I don't think that we will answer in these next couple of days. That's the work that's to be done. It's obviously a conversation with congregations and indeed more specifically with presbyteries. And as the working group is established after the Synod, if the Synod approves the recommendations before us, then some clarity around that and the conversations associated with seeking a definition will be formed. Does that answer your question?
Thank you for the question and the answer. Rob, did you wish to say something?
If I could just add to that. We have done a lot of work on this in the past, and the stuff I referred to, the historical stuff on page 14, refers to a congregational sustainability discussion paper in 2017. Now, we haven't got that here before us, but there is work that we can access that is available to us that has discussion about what we mean by that sort of context.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, we have the paper there. Go and see the General Secretary if you haven't seen it before, and she will show it to you. Thank you. We're about to commence with morning tea and then moving to our working groups. And the Associate General Secretary has the instructions on how to do that. So if we would listen to Sue.
Thank you, Moderator. Members of Synod, I have a number of things to remind you of as we go to morning tea. The Wi-Fi password, which everyone will be anxiously wanting, is there on the screen. So if you have missed that, please get on it, into it, if you need to. Members, the roll is closing at 11:30 this morning, and our first ballot for our meeting opens at 11:30 this morning. You will receive an email to the email address that you have registered for Synod through. So if you want it at a different email, I'm sorry, you will only get it at the email you have registered through. And it takes you to a link in a program called Survey Monkey for you to do your ballot in that electronic form. So our first ballot is for Synod Standing Committee. The ballot closes at 6:45 this evening. We need to elect 5 members to Synod Standing Committee. If you need help, if you can't access your emails on your device that you have with you today, or for some reason haven't got a device, which I'm sure is quite possible in this world, even the digital age we live in, our ballot scrutineers will be in the back office down this back corner of the hall. So if you need help conducting your ballot, go to see them during breaks. The ballot is open until 6:45. There is a password that you will need to enter once you enter into the Survey Monkey, and it is Synod SC, capital S, capital C, and then the numeral 5. So take note of that password. It's not written down anywhere else. It won't be in the email you get, because the whole point of this is that only you in this room who are members have that password at this time. So please take note of that password. You will need that in order to conduct your ballot. If you have any questions about how the ballots are conducted, please see us in that ballot help corner office. Morning tea is about to happen. Your morning tea was on your seats. Your afternoon tea was on your seats when you arrived this morning. Hopefully you've collected those. Those are the snacks for you for both morning and afternoon tea today. And so when you head out, everybody is shocked and horrified. Yes, don't worry, you'll get a yummy treat at lunchtime, I'm sure, if you've ordered through Adelaide West. And so morning tea time is really a movement time. And if you saw my video earlier, there's particular ways we need to move out of this place because of COVID. So when you move out, this side can go through the middle doors, the people on this side, this top door, or the back corner door. The people on this side need to go out those doors and across over to the college, or Yathu Pinthi, and you can get a cuppa over there. There's also barista coffee there. The people on this side head out here, pick up your tea or coffee. There's also barista coffee in the foyer. If you have mobility issues and we are sitting somewhere where that's going to be difficult, that's fine. Move to the exits that's most convenient for you. Please be mindful of others as you're moving. Endeavour to keep distancing as you're able, that kind of thing, please. So working groups start at, lunch is the next thing I need to talk about. There are 44 members who have ordered their lunch through Adelaide West and not yet paid for. So that's the first thing. If you've ordered your lunch and haven't yet paid for it, please see the people at Adelaide West who are just in the foyer as soon as you leave the auditorium before you get your cuppa, or they might not give you a cuppa because you haven't paid for your lunches. They are prepaid by Adelaide West. They've already spent the money, so you really do need to make sure you honour that commitment. The lunches will be available both here and over at the college, but if you have a special dietary need and have indicated that, yours will be available here in the Adelaide West Hall. There's also going to be some food trucks they're setting up at the moment. If you haven't organised your lunch already through Adelaide West, you might like to purchase your lunch from those food trucks that are setting up out there. But it's not lunchtime yet, we're only at morning tea. What's next? Working groups is straight after morning tea, so 11:45 working groups commence, so that's why we don't have a lot of time. I know I have to stop talking so you can actually get there. So please do that. There's maps in your goodie bag. You have a letter of the alphabet on your name tag that tells you your working group, and so you'll find where you need to go, or ask one of us with a yellow lanyard and we'll try and help you find your working group. Working group leaders, please just mind the time and Your feedback sheets are to come back to the back office in the back of the hall at the end of your working group session, or email. If you've got a note taker who's doing it electronically, even better, get them to email it to the Synod email address. Nearly there. Electives. If you haven't chosen your electives, and you'll know that because you won't have a little purple piece of paper in the back of your name tag, I think you need to look now, and if there's no little purple piece of paper, you have not chosen your electives. You need to do that. We are limited by numbers in room capacities, so come and see us at the help desk, which is just outside the back office on this side, at lunchtime. See us at lunchtime, not at morning tea, because there's not enough time at morning tea to do it. See us at lunchtime to choose your electives. And also at lunchtime you can collect your Safe Church poster from Linda Vinyl at the help desk. There's one for each congregation. Some may have already received this poster in other places, but if you haven't, see Linda Vinyl at lunchtime. We won't gather back in the auditorium here until after lunch, so we have moving morning tea, take your cuppa or whatever to your working group session, 1:15 lunch, and then back in here at 2:15. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you, Associate General Secretary. So we ask that you move out now as quickly, as safely as possible. Don't all crowd the doorways. Just be mindful of the way in which we gather, and but we ask that you be into your working groups, ready for action, because this is where the important work, well, it's all important, but the most important that you get to your working group so that you can have a full discussion in that group.